Your body does not know how to react. That's the reason why in the military, police officers, what do they go through? Training. Consistent muscle memory. Muscle memory. Muscle memory. As I'm going through, I'm not going to use my brain anymore. I'm just going to go through muscle memory. Muscle memory. Muscle memory. No matter what, guess what? If you've been in a traumatic incident, how many have ever driven along and gone to an accident, and within that, whenever somebody swerves this way, your body just tenses up? You're just like,
I actually got my hubby hit an IED in Iraq, but like just not necessarily cars, but bridges that make me nervous.
it already, you automatically
I would go like this as I crossing the
yeah.
overpass.
Exactly. So your mind already keyed into that. It knew what was happening. It created a muscle memory for you. And within that, it created also an organ memory for you. Because one, what happens to your heart? It starts going. Yeah. It starts going, it starts going, it starts going, everything else. How many have been in that situation? Say, for example, if somebody had been traumatized in a given situation at a young child, they see that, they incorporate it, and they're thinking, I don't want to go into the dark. But as a parents, what do? Just go in. It's not scary. And the child's like, no! And you're like, all that's happening. And you're like, see, oh, let's go. And your child's like, I'm afraid of the dark. But we don't ask why, do we? For me, that's what I do with my son. So I ask him, I said, why? Why are you afraid of the dark? Why are you afraid of all these different things? And he'll tell me. This is what happened. Exactly. This is why. This is why. And I'm saying, okay, all right. And I accept that. I don't simply say, okay, you know what, son, you need to learn. You need to learn. Yes.
Is this true with all trauma?
This is primarily true with a majority of trauma, yes.
Especially in children?
Mm-hmm. So if you look at the ACEs study, sorry, what was that again?
I'm thinking of child abuse.
Yes.
At young ages.
So I'll post that on there for the ACEs study, and that'll be on your essentials too, so you can look at it. So if you look at ACEs study, how many have ever, and they used to use it as an indicator, but we realized that it wasn't that good. Say for example, when you reach for something and the child twitches, we used to use it as an indicator saying, oh, the child possibly had some level of trauma. But how many have ever been in that situation, somebody reaches over you and you just automatically twitch? You're like, I don't want to get hit. Something might happen. It's not because you're afraid of it, you just simply don't want to get poked in the eye. So they kind of had to do away with that. But as they were going along, they looked at other aspects. Yes?
My question that brought to mind when you were saying that, I recently had a family therapist tell me that children do not have PTSD. How do you feel on this? Especially children who have been abused in some form or another.
Yes, I do believe they have. Again, it's one of those things where, say for example, a child, they are resilient. That is a reality. But they can still be broken. That is the reality, is they can be resilient to a certain extent. They can bounce back. But again, for that individual, that young child, when I worked with kids, I worked with them in terms of domestic violence. I worked with them as a counselor, working with schools. I've seen that. I've seen students who, I'll use this as an example. There was a young individual who had 3 different types of trauma that happened to him. So this young individual, the father got deported because they were not of American descent, so the father got deported. So for the child, they saw 1, dad gone. 1 trauma. 2, mother divorced, father. 2nd trauma. 3, father died. 3 traumas. So when that happened, what happens to the child? From a Dinesh perspective, we're told they're supposed to get over it, 4 days, that's enough time, move on. Right? In a perfect reality. No. So for this child, when I was working with them, one of the things that we were doing was exploring all of that. So you have a young child who's in that unique situation of saying, okay, I'm going through this, I cannot verbalize it, I cannot see past my own reality. Because one, how many children have good friends that also lost their parents and they're all, they all have a group, support group and everything else? What do you think?
Very few.
Very few. So when I talked to the mother said, yeah, I moved on. I think my child should too. And I asked the question, I said, okay, who did you have alongside you to move on with? Well, I had my girlfriends. I had all of them. They were all around me. They supported me. They helped me. They helped me process what was happening. And I moved on. I said, okay, that's great. I said, how long did it take? About a year. I said, really? Wow, that's good. That's good. It's really good. I said, what about your child? I said, did your child have these given support systems? No. Child's told to go to school, learn stuff, not cry about it, get over it, move on. Mother was able to process everything, all the emotions, everything else, was able to process everything that was happening, but for the child, they were left to the side. So one of the things, yeah. And so one of the things we started doing, when we started exploring all these different things, I started asking questions, I started talking with the child, I started saying, okay, what things can we do? I said, tell me about your dad. He looked at me with a puzzled look of, you want to know? I said, yeah, I want to know. I want to know. Tell me. Because what was he told every time? Forget about it. How many can forget a loved one in your life who made a big impact on you? Because right now we lost...
Well, Dad,
Yeah.
like I don't even know my dad.
So how many saw the news yesterday? All of LA is grieving.
That's it.
Yeah. All of LA is grieving. Why? Because we lost an individual who played a key part in our lives, everything else. We saw, if you're into basketball, if you're into resball, if you're into all these different things, you saw an individual who inspired you. For some, it inspired them. For some, they're like, it's okay. But it was impactful. So there's that process of grieving, everything else. The family, I'm pretty sure they're going through all these different processes. But when it's somebody impactful, somebody in your own life, and it's so impactful, it leaves an initial impact. So now for this young individual, that's what had happened. So we started exploring. I started asking questions. I said, tell me about your dad. Tell me everything. So what was one thing that you liked about your dad? And this individual was telling me everything. Boom, 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 boom. And just sharing everything. And at some point, what happens? These tears start coming down. I miss him. I miss him. Why is he not here? I said, all right. Let it all out. And he just kept crying. He just kept going, just going, just going. I said, let everything out. Everything, everything. He's looking at me in terms of, you're okay with me crying about this? I said, yes, let's get it all out. Because again, we're going to try again, and we're trying to get everything out. Because I want you to process everything. I couldn't tell him I want you to process everything, because for a young child, they're looking at me like this is... And I said, all right, here's the next step. I want you now to write down everything that you want to say to your father. As the net, they were like, whoa, I said, tell him about your day. Tell him about your day, everything you did, every possible element. He started journaling. At the beginning, when he started, what he did was, it was so, he was angry. He was angry. You saw how he wrote. You just saw the anger, everything. He was just trying to get it out. Notice how it was affecting his bodily functions. That trauma affected everything that he was doing. It affected the memory. It affected everything to the point where it was just like, ah. After the second visits, third visits, fourth visits, became more articulate, started drawing pictures on there, started doing more. It was one of those things where he knew that one, there was an outlet. That's one of the things you're always looking at with trauma. You're trying to say, okay, is there an outlet? So for children, is there a possibility of PTSD? Yes. Is it long term? It can be. But that's one of the things you're always looking at is, can this impact a child? Yes, but if they process it, that's all you're trying to do is help them cope in a healthy manner. Mother, she coped perfectly because she moved on. Yes?
In a child who has experienced multiple traumatic trauma from almost since pre-birth
Yeah.
until the current age is 7. We've seen such things as outbursts.
Yeah.
Using a knife, a pair of scissors, or whatever as a weapon to attempt to inflict pain.
Yeah.
And injury if possible.
Mm-hmm.
And anger, tearing up the house, throwing things, this kind of stuff at the caretaker. What would you do with a child like this?
So a lot of times,
This child,
what do we utilize? We utilize oppositional defiant disorder, right? We're looking at it from the area of they're being defiant. They're just going through oppositional defiant. They're defying everything I'm doing. So from a child, that's primarily what they're looking at. Or they're looking at the aspect of, you know what, they probably have ADHD. They probably have all these different things. And again, it might be the other aspect of having a comorbid disorder. Comorbid meaning, one, they have multiple disorders that are happening. But one of the things that you're looking at from a counseling or even from a psychological aspect is, how can we allow this individual and how can we tackle these different things individually as we're going along? Because one of the things you're looking at is, how can I help them in this given window of time to allow them to better regulate themselves, to better cope with different situations, to better cope with the environment, to better cope with the familial structure. Because if you have it from a very young age, say for example, there was a study done on mothers who were pregnant during 9/11. So during that study, one of the things is they studied the individuals. How much time do I have? Oh, okay, we stopped. We barely even scratched the surface. So one of the things is for the mothers, they were studying in terms of what is happening to the child within the womb. So one of the things is when you're highly stressed, when I worked with domestic violence victims, a lot of times I was always talking to a lot of the mothers in terms of what is happening. A lot of times if a person is in a violent relationship, what ends up happening? They end up going back. They end up just staying. And a lot of times they use the outlook of, I'm staying for my kids. And for me, the way I look at it is, one, it's not healthy.
It makes it even worse.
It makes it even worse.
Sees the drama going on.
Exactly. Sees everything, right? Sees everything that they're doing. Everything. Sees and learns it, incorporates it. You see.
They think that's how stuff's supposed to be.
Exactly. It becomes a cycle. It looks at the outlook of, this is normal. Because when I work with high schoolers, I always ask them the question. I said, do you know how to date? And a lot of them are like, what? And I asked this question when I was working with a high school out in Chinle. I called them out, which is horrible. I'm sorry, you're not supposed to ever do that, but I do. That's when I was working as a consultant. That's my excuse. So when I was working I was doing a presentation on teen dating violence. And so when I was talking about that, I was looking at the outlook of, what if another person rejects you? You ask them out, you say, hey, you know what, I like you, everything else, hearts, everything else, hashtag awesome, hashtag all these different things, all of this. And I said, you go up to this person, and you ask me, I like you, you want to go out sometime? A lot of times we're thinking, I'm pretty awesome. They're not gonna reject me. Sometimes it's literally at the back of our mind, we're like, maybe they might. But I asked that question, I said, what if that happens? What if a person rejects you? I had one individual in the front raise their hand. I said, all right, yeah. I said, what's going on? And it's one of those individuals who always have the gangster outfit, everything else, the bandanas, all this and that. And he looks at me. I said, what would happen if this happened? You ask somebody out. It wouldn't happen. I said, really? I said, wow. I said, I think I'm a pretty confident guy. I know that at times, guess what? It can still happen to me. But this individual's like, nah, it wouldn't happen. Kind of had that whole, I said, okay. I said, what would you do? He looks at me. I'd convince her. It just got quiet. In that whole auditorium, I would convince her. And I'm thinking, how would you convince her? It literally just sparked my interest. I'm like, how? I'd make her like me. And I'm like, you would make her like you. Whoa! What was the learned response? The learned response was, if somebody doesn't like you, you force them to like you. Even though, guess what? Relationship revolves around the aspect of what? Having something relatable. It was still the outlook of, doesn't matter. I learned from my home life that I can force somebody to like me. I said, wow. So notice how, throughout their whole life, that's the only outlet they have. Now you go back to the 9/11. So these are mothers who were in the 9/11 attack, Twin Towers. And so one, they analyzed. They looked at the mothers after they gave birth. Their stress levels for the mother was very high, but for the child, guess what? Stress levels were very high as well. They initially, what happened? Their stress levels were so high because one, they had to compensate it. So what was happening for the mothers? When they were in that stressful environment, when they were in that stressful situation, now mind you, this was just one incident, that was happening. There was excess fear, there was all these different things that were happening, and so when that happens, you have all of this going on in your body, you have massive amounts of your stress hormones going through, it's coursing through who? The child, the baby. So the baby's like, oh my goodness, what's going on? Ah! And everything's happening. And so now, when they gave birth, the child had elevated stress levels. So it starts from a very young age. So you see that. So now when that happens, and if the mother is in an abusive relationship, stress levels are already high. When they were born, stress levels were still high, still high, still high.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Related to the story that you were saying about 9/11,
Yes.
I know that I did a research that was also done with women, I believe somewhere like near Russia, where there was an ice storm, and a researcher took that opportunity to do the same thing and study the women that were pregnant during that time, and she found out that after the study, I believe went for 15 years. It was a longitudinal study, and she found out that the longer the women were under stress during the ice storm, or the longer they experienced the ice storm, their kids grew up with certain disabilities such as speech impediments, and they were slow at learning and things like that. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Exactly. So one of the things is, if you look at all these different aspects, notice how it attaches itself to one thing or another. So you have all these different detriments. So now when that happens, it creates a memory. So as a counselor, what you're learning to do is try to key in on that and try to help them regulate. Because a lot of times what happens is individuals say, you know what, this is what happened and that's the end all for everything else. I give up, I'm just going to go along with life. That can happen, true. Say for example, if you ever find out that you're diabetic or pre-diabetic or you have hypertension, everything else, what do you end up doing? It scares you for a while, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm going to die. And then you look at it and say, well, I can make life changes. I can improve this, improve that. It may not happen overnight, but I'm going to make these changes. Same thing happens with stress. Because one of the things is, when I used to work with domestic violence, sexual assaults, and work with offenders, and when I worked with all these individuals, my stress level was way up here. I was an adrenaline junkie. I loved it. I was like, yeah! And then at some point it was like, I need to take some time for me.
We should do a stress test.
Do a stress test, it's literally going to be off the chart. So one of the things is, what I had to do is I had to find another outlet. I had to find different avenues. Other things that I can do to lower that. Because one, I want to stay around for the next maybe 80 more years. I think I can do it. So that's one of the things you're always looking at is the impact. So I know we only touched a little bit on this. So let's go to the next slide. There you go. So each branch of the axon ends in a swelling called a knob. So you see the knob? Knobs do not touch the receiving neuron or organ, so that's where that little synaptic cleft happens. That's where the information is shared. Boom. Communication is achieved between the two areas through a synapse. Boom, boom, boom. So all this is happening in your body, throughout your brain, everything else, so it's like boom, 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 boom. Happens like that, very quickly. So does anybody have any questions for today? I know we're 10:50, right? Yes. Is it almost time? I think it's almost time. Does anybody have any questions? Because I know I end up, as I'm talking, all of a sudden it just shuts off. Does anybody have any questions on that side? It was a quick class. It really was. So
Really good class.
I shall have this up and everything else so you guys can view it and just marvel at it. I love making PowerPoints. It's exciting. I don't know why. It's exciting for me. It's my stress level. It helps with my stress levels and everything else. And then if you notice it, if you go on there and you click on certain buttons, it'll allow you to go to different places here and there that I find are useful and everything else. So within that, you guys have 2 more minutes, I think. Does anybody have any questions? 3 more minutes.
Yeah.
Actually, I have one question that's
Yes.
almost off topic.
Sure.
This thing with trauma in kids, I'm quite interested in because I have a family member with these challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a small little girl, highly intelligent. And I would like to know what the, well, I can't remember it now. Things that are related to children and trauma.
Yeah.
According to Danae culture, the babies in utero can see and hear
Mm-hmm.
the world that's on the outside. Well, it's actually assumed that they can hear. That was done in a study about 50 some odd years ago.
Yeah.
And I can testify that it absolutely is true. I don't know if the vision part of it has been developed yet or not. So with this in mind, this little one was traumatized pre-birth
I think that's mine.
as well as after birth. What is it called when a child reacts to this later in their early childhood stage by killing small animals? What is the term for that? Oh, you're laughing.
No.
You're laughing.
No, it's not that. It's. So one of the things is that there's that little trauma. the behavior, one of the things is I would, one, try to make sure that the individual is regulating a lot of things that are happening. Because you indicated that there was a level of trauma, everything else. I hate that one that does that. So, okay, over here. I'm gonna go to this video. So one of the things is to regulate the child. The reason why is for the child themselves, they're starting to practice different aspects that are considered abnormal and also possibly dangerous. The reason why is if you look at psychopathology, you're looking at the outlook of what can happen in the long run. So again, that's one of the things you're always looking at. I will, if you can, send me an email so then I can respond to that. So then we're able to kind of have a better outlook, so that we're on the same level. So that's one of the things that I would advise, because one, I want to make sure the young individual is also cared for, but in addition to that, to try to make sure that they're able to regulate the things that they're processing, because they're looking at it as this is normal behavior to kill small animals and everything else. But if you look at it from a psychopathological aspect, that's one of the things we're always looking at is the impact of that. How are they regulated? And as they carry on, you have fire starting, you have all these different things that also start to play into it, which then goes into another field of psychopathology. So hopefully you're able to email that to me. So, yes. Thank you.